Hey everybody, it's Mark Bouchard with Police Mentors. Today we are going to be talking about the book, Why People Die by Suicide. It's written by Thomas Joyner, who's one of the top psychologists, researchers, and experts on suicide. So he's got a really important model. The most important thing to start out with is the acquired ability for lethal self-injury. One of his quotes, past self-injury is the most powerful and dangerous way to acquire lethality. So one of the reasons why this is so important for first responders, police officers, and people from the military is what he would argue is that we acquire this ability to overcome pain and fear of death and hardship because of the nature of our job. And then that actually can be a risk factor for us because now we're able to use that ability to overcome the fear of death because enacting your own suicide is a quite fearful thing. So we do see higher rates of suicide in some professions, policing included. There's a study of 4.4 million people that passed away, and police officers had a 54% higher rate of suicide. So it's a crucial topic, and Dr. Joyner's model provides some insight on one of the reasons why police officers are at a higher risk. The other thing is the nature of firearms. There's another book called Police Suicide Epidemic in Blue, where Dr. John Violante, who's another one of the top experts on police suicide, says that 95% of police suicides happen by firearm, and that firearm is the most lethal means of suicide, which again would show why police officers would be at such an increased risk of suicide. So another quote from Dr. Joyner, he says, desire for suicide occurs when basic needs for effectiveness and connectedness are thwarted. Anguish, viewed here as perceived burdensomeness and thwarted belonging, does come and go. So his desire for death has two aspects, perceived burdensomeness and thwarted belonging. And that's a really important thing to understand. It's two states of essentially emotional pain that causes people to actually desire death, but that those who haven't acquired the ability to enact their own death are less likely to commit to die from suicide. So he talks about another aspect, which is the need for affiliation. The thwarting of this need is a main component of the desire for death. So he continues with the need to belong. And one thing he says about that, my view is that this need to belong is so powerful that when satisfied, can prevent suicide, even when perceived burdensomeness and the acquired ability to enact lethal self-injury are in place. And that's where that isolation really becomes such a key aspect. One thing he says about loved ones, when asked about the likelihood of suicide, many patients respond that though they have thought of suicide, their connection to a loved one makes it impossible. Example, I couldn't do it to so-and-so. I've heard that from people. I didn't know the right way of explaining it, but when I've asked someone if they were having thoughts of suicide, I've had them say to me, I couldn't do that to my dad, or I couldn't do that to my loved ones, or I couldn't do that to my kids. And I think it's really important to understand how that can impact just the totality of it. So in regards to children, having children, or this is another quote from the book, having children, especially young children, was protective against suicide, even when accounting for powerful variables like marital status and psychiatric disability. So I think that also brings the connection because when we have children, they desperately need us. Here's another quote. There are relatively few people in the dangerous convergence zone, those who are at the greatest risk for serious suicidal behavior. And that's where he has two main categories, people who desire death, which they would have those two interpersonal states, that failed belonging, or thwarted belonging, and their perceived burdensomeness, along with the ability to enact that suicide, which he says is that acquired ability, which is why you'd have higher risk, not just for first responders, but even people who are anorexic or who are able to push themselves through extreme pain. So he also says men are approximately 4 times more likely than women to die by suicide, whereas women are approximately 3 times more likely than men to attempt suicide. I think this is also relevant to some of the other professions outside of policing and first responding. So things like in the medical field, for example, in doctors, you actually see that the suicide rate is higher for doctors, but it's proportionally higher for female doctors. And veterinarians is another one where they have a 4 times higher suicide rate than the general public. And a lot of veterinarians are women and they have access to lethal means. Although theirs aren't firearms, theirs are medication. So I think it shows how interconnected this all is. So let me know what you think down in the comments and let me know if this was helpful. Okay, thank you.